Hey guys, and welcome back to my 4th episode of my True Crime Japan series. This is the story about the murder of the Miyazawa family that occurred on the 30th of December 2000. An unknown man entered their home, killed the family, stayed in their home for 10 hours and then left. And to this day, the man has never been found. He's never been identified. It is still an unsolved case despite the incredible amount of evidence left at the crime scene. I'm going to start with some background information and then we will get started on what was thought to have happened on this night. So the Miyazawa family consisted of 44-year-old Mikio, 41-year-old Yasuko, 8-year-old Nina, and 6-year-old Rei. Mikio worked for Interbrand, which is a London-based marketing firm, and Yasuko worked as a teacher. The family had moved to an area called Setagaya, which is in Tokyo Prefecture, in 1990. It was a very promising residential area with about 200 houses filled with families around this area. The family moved into a house that was split into 2 homes. On one side was the Miyazawa family, and on the other side was where Yasuko's mother, sister, and brother-in-law lived. However, even though the house is attached, there was no internal connection between the 2 homes. Sitting directly behind the family home was a skate park that was known to attract a lot of teenagers and skater type people. The skate park had people hanging out there all day and late into the night and caused some noise complaint issues between them and the Miyazawa family. The skate park was so popular that the council had plans to expand it. Therefore, the 200 families who had originally lived there in 1990 were reduced to just 4 in 2000. The Miyazawas were also due to move out in the next few months, but unfortunately they would never get that chance. Overall, the Miyazawa family were a typical Japanese family. They didn't have any enemies or anything like that. However, the week leading up to the New Year's period in the year 2000, there were some altercations or disagreements that occurred in the skate park. Mikio had confronted a group of skaters who were in the skate park to ask them to keep the noise down, and there was also another witness that said that he saw Mikio talking with a group of Japanese gang members, like a motorcycle gang. December 30th, 2000 was the Miyazawa's family last day alive. They were preparing for the New Year's period, so they had gone out to shop until about 6:30 p.m. on that night. So yeah, they arrived back at home at 6:30, and then at 7 p.m. Yasuko's mother, who lived next door, called the home and asked if the kids wanted to come over to watch TV, and Nina ended up going next door and watched a recorded TV show until about 9:30 when she came home. The last record of anyone being alive in the Miyazawa family was at 10:38 when Mikio had accessed a work email that could have only been accessed by him because it was password protected. No one could have ever guessed what was about to occur within the next hour of him checking this email. The next morning at about 11 a.m, Yasuko's mother tried calling the Miyazawas to plan for that afternoon. However, when she called, she realized that there was no ringtone. The phone line had been cut. She was a little worried, obviously, so she went next door to see what was up, and she knocked on the door and there was no movement. There was no one coming to the door, no sounds. So at this point, she used her own set of keys to enter the house, and she was confronted with Mikio's body at the bottom of the steps, and he had been stabbed to death. She called out for the rest of the family, obviously shocked to her core, and she had no replies. So she went upstairs and she was again confronted with 2 more dead family members. It was her daughter and her granddaughter, Yasuko and Nina. They had both been brutally stabbed, somewhat more violently than Mikio was. And it was at this point she really felt it. And she kind of bent down and touched their cold, dead bodies. I can't imagine what she was going through at this moment. But obviously there was still one more family member to be found who hadn't been accounted for. So she went into the bedroom next to where they were laying, and she found Ray in his bed, and he had been strangled to death. The discovery was just as much as a shock to the investigators and the police as it was to Yasuko's mother. The police began their investigation, and the amount of evidence found at the crime scene was truly incredible. The 2 murder weapons had been found. One was a sashimi knife, which is a knife made to cut fish. This did not belong to the Miyazawa family, but the other murder weapon was a knife that did belong to the Miyazawa family. In the home, there was also a significant amount of blood not coming from any of the Miyazawas, so this meant that the perpetrator did get injured in this attack. He had used sanitary items to try to stop his bleeding. His shoe prints were all through the house. He had eaten ice cream and melon from their fridge and freezer. He had gathered up all of their credit cards and IDs and set them out nicely on the living room table. He left fingerprints, and he had also gone to the toilet and left his feces in the toilet. He had also very strangely filled up the bathtub and put a whole lot of seemingly random things in there. He put in a whole lot of documents that belonged to the family, and he also put in his ice cream wrappers that he ate, and he also put in some of the sanitary items. I believe that maybe he was trying to cover evidence or his fingerprints or something, but obviously he didn't realize the huge amount of evidence he had already scattered all throughout the house. But that's just my guess of why it was like that. So at this point, in my opinion, the police have all they need to catch this killer, but obviously this is not always how it works out. But the police were somewhat able to figure out what happened that night using the evidence that they did find. They believe that late that night, one man had entered the home between 10:38 and 11:30 p.m. They think he entered through the second story bathroom window of the family home. He then proceeded to Ray's room and strangled him in his bed. Then Mikio heard a disturbance upstairs, so he went up to investigate, and there was an altercation at the top of the stairs. Mikio was stabbed to death and then pushed down the stairs. Next, the perpetrator went ahead and stabbed Yasuko and Nina, who were on the top loft of the house. However, the sashimi knife broke throughout this attack, so the perpetrator had to retreat. It was at this point where Yasuko found a first aid kit and started attending to her daughter. I think she thought that the perpetrator had fled the scene, so she went ahead and tried to save her daughter's life, who was probably bleeding to death. This was simply not the case. The perpetrator went down to the kitchen and collected a knife from the kitchen and then headed back upstairs to violently stab them both to death. After he murdered the entire family, evidence showed that he stayed in the family home for up to 10 hours after the attack. He didn't move the bodies or anything, so he would have just been walking around them while he was just hanging out in the house. He napped on the sofa, he rummaged around documents, ate food, used the toilet. He also used the family computer at 1:18 while he ate ice cream bars and browsed the saved bookmarks. He tried using the family's credit cards to purchase theatre tickets that had been bookmarked on the computer. This was likely to see if he could access their accounts through their credit cards, but he was unsuccessful in those attempts. He accessed the computer one more time at 10:05 a.m. the next day, where he browsed the website of Mikio's company and the school that Yasuko worked at. He didn't search anything beyond these bookmarks on the computer, and once he had finished, after about 10 minutes that morning on the computer, he unplugged the computer. He is either thought to have left in a hurry out the bathroom window when Yasuko's mother had knocked on the door, or it is thought that he left on his own accord after he was finished with the computer right out the front door. To add to the evidence, there were also some of his clothing items found at the scene that were covered in blood, so it is likely that he left those behind and used Mikio's clothing to leave the property because obviously his clothes were covered in blood. I found a really good link online describing all of the items that the killer was wearing and where they were purchased and sizes and things like that. I'll put the link down below so you guys can have a better look at it if you're interested, but I'll also put some pictures up here as well. I do recommend to look at it. It's quite interesting, I think. So this photo became the famous photo of the mysterious killer. This photo was spread all throughout Japan, pleading the public for any information. So two of the most significant pieces of clothing items, in my opinion, were the bum bag he was wearing, or like a hip bag, and the shoes. First, the hip bag. It was kind of like a big bum bag or a fanny pack. A significant piece of information found in the bag was sand. This sand was believed to have originated from America, specifically an approximate area around the Edwards Air Force Base in California. However, I have seen some conflicting reports that this sand had actually come from another beach in Japan, so take this information with a grain of salt. I'm not too sure about this piece of information. But in this bag they also found a special kind of tape that was popular with skateboarders to work on their skateboards. Another significant piece of information was the shoes he was wearing. He had put his footprints all throughout the family home and they narrowed it down to a very specific shoe. It was a Schlesinger shoe, but his particular size was not sold in Japan. It was only sold in Korea. It was also found that his clothing had been washed in hard water, and Japan's water system is soft water only. So this gives the big inclination that he had been overseas prior to these murders. Despite the insane amount of evidence, years and years passed, and there were various different witness reports, but they really did come up to nothing, and there were unsuccessful attempts at trying to figure out who this person is through fingerprints and stuff like that. However, in 2016 they had a sense of hope when forensic testing became available for this case. They tested his blood that was left at the crime scene, and it turned out that he had type A blood, but more interestingly they found out what ethnicity he was. So his mother was from a southern European country and his father was either Korean, Chinese or Japanese, but he was most likely Korean because the gene that he had was most likely to come from a Korean father. There are some theories that the perpetrator is somehow linked to either the American military or the Korean military, mostly because of the sand that was found in his little bum bag, but I'm not sure about this piece of evidence. But if it is true and it is linked to the airbase in California, then I think that is very telling in a way. It was also thought that maybe this person was either a child of a military person or a spouse or someone linked to the military in general. Another theory is that this person was one of the people who hung out at the skate park. This definitely fits a lot of the evidence in this case, including the clothing and the tape that was found in his bum bag. And if this person did hang out at the skate park, they could have very easily scouted the family and perhaps stalked them for a number of months. Another thing that I think is really important to mention is the animal torture incidences that occurred in this area. The first happened in August 2000 when a cat was found with his tail half cut off with a knife. A few days after this, another cat was found with a nail in its eye. And then in mid-December, another cat was found and the left hind leg had been sliced off using a sharp knife. And this cat was so badly injured that it actually died the day that they brought it into the vet. These all occurred very close to the Miyazawa family. For example, the last one that did occur was at Setagaya Park, which is literally down the road from the house, and the person who did this was never found. I personally believe these animal abuse occurrences is linked to the crime of the Miyazawa murders. I think it's too much of a coincidence that these happened and what happened in the Miyazawa house happened as well. But there are so many possibilities of who this person could be. I don't think he's in Japan anymore. I even think that he could be a serial killer that has perhaps killed before because he was so comfortable being in the home, but then again it could just be like a mental illness thing and he wanted the comfort of being in their home. Like maybe it was like this sick mentality, like he wanted to be in their home. I don't know how that works, but that's another possibility. There is the possibility that he has burgled houses before because of the way he ransacked the house. He opened the drawers from the bottom up, which is very common for burglars to do. As well as this, I do believe he is quite physically able, since he was able to lift himself up to the second story window, which I think would be quite difficult for someone to do. Another potentially important piece of information that I do want to add is that there was an unidentified man who came into a medical center over 122 kilometers away from the Miyazawa home, which was accessible by train. This man had a deep gash on his right hand, and it was deep enough to see bone. This man did not identify himself or tell the medical staff what happened that caused this accident. At that time, you didn't need to share these things because of like privacy, I guess. So he was never identified, but the nurses did remember thinking that it was very suspicious because he was so nonchalant about it, about this deep cut in his hand. But the police didn't find out about this until 10 months after the murders. This video just outlines the basic information of this case, but there's more information online if you want to look more into it. There's plenty more like witness accounts online and different theories and things like that, but I couldn't fit it all into one video. But if you guys do want to check it out, I highly recommend that you do. I researched this case for hours and hours and hours, and it really mind boggled me that this person was never caught. The amount of evidence was incredible, and I'm just like, was there no security cameras in 2000? And how did no one see him leaving the home? It was the middle of the day. There must have been someone who saw him, but there hasn't been anything that has come up. There have been over 250,000 people who have worked on this case in the past 20 years, and there are currently 37 people currently working on this case. I hope that one day this mystery can be solved and the perpetrator can be brought to justice. This is the end of my video today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If I did miss out any important piece of information, please put it down below so we can all see it and we can all discuss it together. So yeah, I obviously give prayers to the Miyazawa family and their immediate family and friends and stuff like that. It's so scary to me, and I really hope this person is caught. So yeah, that's the end of my video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video.